the price of coming home, he stepped off the military transport plane with the same steady steps he practiced during deployment. But somehow, every move felt heavier here. The air wasn't filled with sand or smoke anymore. Yet, he still tasted dust in his mouth. His boots touched American soil, but his heart was still somewhere in the Iraqi desert. Captain Adrian Ross, 35, decorated combat officer, survivor of 3 separate attacks, finally going home. People clapped when soldiers walked out of the gate. Parents screamed names. Wives burst into tears. Kids rushed forward, holding handmade posters and balloons. But Adrian didn't rush. He didn't even look up. His eyes followed the ground, as if watching for something like an explosive device that might suddenly appear beneath his boots. Homecoming is supposed to feel like victory, but sometimes coming home is just another battlefield. He didn't hug people the way others did. He kept distance. Even when his mother wrapped her arms around him, he barely responded. She whispered, "Honey, you're safe now." But the word safe meant nothing. Nothing was safe. Not anymore. At home, the living room lights were soft, warm, almost peaceful. His parents cooked his favorite dinner. His family tried to make jokes. They tried to fill silence with noise. But Adrian barely touched his food. He sat there, hearing sounds no one else heard, metal hitting metal, muffled shouting, distant explosions. His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "Son, it's over. You're home. You can start living again." Adrian forced a laugh, just a short breath pretending to be a smile. He knew they meant well. But how do you explain that your brain hasn't left the war yet? That night, he walked outside. The street was quiet, peaceful, filled with trees instead of concrete walls. Moonlight instead of flares. But even in silence, he felt vibrations like the ground might erupt any moment. Then he heard a child's voice across the street. "Daddy, hurry." Something inside him snapped like an alarm. He reached forward instinctively, ready to pull the child down, shield them with his body, just like he had done more times than he could count in Iraq. His breath stopped. His muscles locked. His pulse spiked. But nothing happened. Just a little girl running toward her father's car. Adrian stood there, shoulders tense, fists shaking. His breathing was loud, panicked like bullets were flying past him again. The little girl laughed, unaware of the panic she triggered. Her father looked confused for a moment, then gently smiled. But Adrian only stepped back, lost again. He whispered, "Still out there, I'm still out there," fade out. The things he doesn't say. Adrian woke up before sunrise again. He didn't remember sleeping, just closing his eyes and reopening them inside another memory. His room felt safe, familiar, but his heartbeat told a different story. His mind kept replaying the same 3 seconds over and over again. The explosion, the sand, the scream. He stepped into the kitchen quietly. His mother was awake already, but she pretended she wasn't watching him. She placed a cup of coffee near his place, gently, as if sudden movement could break him like glass. "Rough night?" she asked softly. "I've had worse," he replied. Simple words, heavy meaning. She looked at him the way mothers look when they're terrified of the truth, but even more terrified of asking for it. "Are you planning to go back to work soon?" "Maybe." He didn't say which work she meant, military or civilian. He wasn't sure himself. Later, he walked through town. Everything looked smaller: houses, cars, people, even problems. Yet every sudden noise made him tense. A construction hammer, a slamming car door, a motorcycle engine. His mind measured distance, threat, exit points. He couldn't turn that off. At the grocery store, someone said, "Hey, aren't you Captain Ross? Thank you for your service." Adrian forced a polite smile. People loved saying thanks, but none of them looked long enough to notice pain behind his eyes. Patriotism made everyone feel good. Trauma made everyone uncomfortable. At the cashier line, a man complained loudly about something ridiculous: slow service, expired coupons, whatever. Adrian stared at him, thinking, "You have no idea how lucky you are for this to be your worst problem today." Walking home, he saw 2 teenagers playfully punching each other, laughing, pretending to be soldiers. He froze. Their innocent play triggered memories he tried to bury. His breath tightened. And then the flashback hit. A dusty corridor in Iraq. Alarms. A wounded private screaming that he couldn't feel his legs. Adrian dragging him through smoke while bullets cut the air. Another explosion. A moment of silence. And then the same scream echoing forever. He shook his head, trying to shut the memory down. The teenagers laughed again, unaware of the battlefield inside his mind. That night, Adrian sat on the porch, staring at the street. He whispered a truth out loud for the first time. I shouldn't have made it back. Not because he wanted to die, but because he couldn't understand why he survived when better men didn't. The guilt was a weight heavier than armor. Fade out. Echoes in the night. It was close to midnight when Adrian woke up gasping for air. Not just startled, terrified. His heart raced violently as if it wanted to escape his chest. Sweat soaked his pillow, and for a moment he didn't know where he was. He reached for the nightstand like he used to reach for his rifle in the dark. But there was no rifle here, only a lamp. His breathing slowed, but the shaking stayed. He left the house quietly, trying not to wake anyone. The night was cold, the street silent, and the stars were brighter than he remembered. But silence was dangerous. Silence meant something terrible was about to happen. In Iraq, every quiet minute was followed by explosions. He sat on a bench near the old playground he used to visit as a kid. The swings moved slightly in the breeze, almost like someone was on them. He felt watched not by an enemy, but by memories waiting to strike again. Then a voice came from behind him. Couldn't sleep either. He turned sharply, ready for threat, but saw an old neighbor, Mrs. Turner, around 65, kind eyes, walking her tiny dog. She used to give him cookies when he played outside as a little boy. She sat beside him without asking permission. You know, when my husband came back from Vietnam, he didn't sleep much either. Adrian looked surprised. He expected pity, not understanding. Mrs. Turner continued. He used to walk at night, thinking no one noticed. But I did. I always did a silence. But this time, a softer one. He told me once, war doesn't end until you decide to let it leave. But it's not that simple, is it? Adrian swallowed hard. No, ma'am, it is. She gently touched his arm, not forceful, just human. You survived something terrible. That means some part of life still needs you here. He didn't know what to say. No one had ever said something that didn't sound like a motivational speech from TV. This felt real, human. Before leaving, she said, "My door is always open, even at night." When she walked away, Adrian looked up at the sky again. For the first time, the silence felt less threatening. Still painful, still heavy, but not completely alone. Yet, as he stood to go home, something else echoed in his mind. the face of a soldier he couldn't save. And that memory stayed awake long after the night ended. Fade out. The things left unspoken, Adrian started waking up earlier than everyone, not because he wanted to, but because his body refused to sleep once the sun started rising. The house was quiet again, too quiet. His parents were still asleep, and for a moment he could almost pretend none of this was real. Almost. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. His mind wandered back to a night in Iraq, a patrol gone wrong, a sudden blast, a friend's voice shouting his name. He blinked hard, forcing himself into the present. His father walked in, pretending to be casual. Morning. Adrian only nodded. His dad hesitated before speaking again. You've hardly talked since you got home. Adrian shrugged, eyes still on that cold coffee. His father took a slow breath. You know, I can handle the truth, whatever it is. You don't have to protect us. Protect. That word hit him like shrapnel. Protecting people was the only thing he knew how to do. Now he couldn't even protect himself from memories. Finally, he whispered, I don't know how to talk about it. His father didn't push further. He simply placed a hand over his son's, a gesture stronger than words ever could be. Later that day, Adrian walked to the local clinic. He stood outside for nearly 20 minutes, trying to convince himself to go in. He wasn't sure why he came, maybe to ask for help, maybe to turn around and leave. Inside, he filled out a form. His hands shook slightly. Reason for visit, it asked. He stared at the blank line. What could he possibly write? Nightmares, flashbacks, survivor's guilt, still living a war that ended months ago. He simply wrote, trouble sleeping. The nurse called his name, and for a moment he felt 13 again, terrified, vulnerable, exposed. He sat with a therapist for nearly an hour. He barely spoke, but when he left, he felt something unusual, not better, but not trapped either. Walking home, he saw Mrs. Turner watering her flowers. She waved gently. Good morning, Adrian. A simple greeting. But for the first time since he returned, he felt something close to belonging, even if just for a moment. That night, while everyone slept, Adrian quietly opened his window. Cold air touched his skin. He closed his eyes and listened, not for explosions, not for alarms, but for silence. And this time, silence didn't feel like danger. It felt like possibility. Fade out. What healing looks like weeks passed slowly. Adrian never really got better, but he began noticing things he didn't before: birds in the morning, the warm smell of coffee, the sound of rain hitting the windows. Very small things. But after war, small things feel enormous. He started attending therapy twice a week. At first, he barely spoke, but eventually, a few sentences slipped out. Stories that had been locked inside him for months, maybe years. He talked about the men he couldn't save, the last look in their eyes, the guilt that lived inside him like a second heart. One day, the therapist asked softly, "What do you think they would want for you now?" He stared at the ground for a long time. No explosions, no shouting, just silence. "I think," he whispered, "they'd want me to live the life they didn't get to." It was the first time he'd said anything like that out loud. Later, he helped fix Mrs. Turner's broken fence. She insisted she could do it herself, but Adrian needed to keep his hands busy. The more he worked, the less his mind replayed old scenes. At dinner that night, his mother said, "You seem lighter today." He didn't answer, but he knew she was right. Later, he found an old photo album in the attic, pictures of him as a kid wearing plastic soldier helmets and pretending to be a hero. He didn't know whether to smile or cry. He sat on the floor staring at those photographs for almost an hour. He whispered, "War wasn't supposed to be this." He thought healing would feel like freedom. Instead, it felt like learning how to breathe again. That evening, while sitting on the porch, he saw a young couple walking a stroller. The father kissed the baby's head, the mother laughed, and Adrian felt something unexpected, not jealousy, not sadness, hope. He didn't know what the future looked like, but for the first time, he wanted one. Fade out. Home, after all months passed. Not everything was healed, not everything was fixed. But Adrian had stopped fighting the war alone. He learned something no battlefield ever taught him: how to exist without being in survival mode. One morning, his father knocked on the door gently. "Breakfast is ready." Adrian looked around his room. No uniforms, no duffel bags, just quietness and morning sunlight. He stood there for a moment and whispered to himself, "Okay, let's begin today." During therapy that week, the therapist asked, "Do you think you're ready to start working again?" Adrian answered differently this time. I think I want to, not I should, not I have to, but I want to. He applied for a job at a veterans support office, helping returning soldiers adjust to civilian life. His interview wasn't perfect. He hesitated, searched for words, stumbled a little. But for the first time, he wasn't ashamed of those pauses. They were part of his story. The interviewer, a former Marine, simply nodded. You've already done the hardest part coming home. The rest we do together. That sentence hit deeper than he expected. On his first day, he met young soldiers recently discharged. Their eyes looked exactly like his did months ago. Fear, confusion, emptiness. He sat with one of them for 2 hours, talking quietly. He didn't give advice, he just listened. And that alone felt like service again, but without the gunfire. Later that afternoon, while walking home, Mrs. Turner waved at him from her garden. Working hard, I see. Adrian laughed, genuinely laughed. A small sound, but powerful. That evening, he sat outside with his mother. The sun set slowly behind quiet houses. He said, I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but I think I'm ready to see it. His mother squeezed his hand. That's all any of us can do. He looked up at the sky, the same sky he saw from desert nights, except now it didn't look threatening. It looked wide, open, meaningful. He finally understood. Coming home wasn't a moment, it was a process. And he was finally allowing himself to start it. Fade out. End of season.